Hey there, folks, and welcome out to the Single Player Podcast. I'm your one and only host, I'm 16-Bit. I got a good show for this week because we're going to be talking about the Callisto Protocol gets banned, the PS5 hits 2 million in Japan, and Hellena Taylor admits she's a liar, plus more. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and I'll be with you in a bit. Alright folks, we're back, and now it's time to start the show with my favorite segment, your favorite segment, everyone in the world's favorite segment. It's time for the gaming forecast. So let's see what's coming out between the week of November 6th to the 12th. Okay, on November 8th, you have 3 games coming out, A Little to the Left for Windows and Mac, Football Manager 2023 for Windows, Mac, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Series X, iOS, and Android, and Sonic Frontiers for Windows, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. Then on the 9th, you have God of War Ragnarok for PlayStation 4 and 5. And then on the 10th, you have 3 games coming out. Hakoniwa Bokujo Hitsuji Mura, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, releasing exclusively in Japan on Nintendo Switch. Aichu, also releasing exclusively in Japan for Nintendo Switch. And Police Simulator Patrol Officers for PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. Then on the 11th, you have 2 games coming out. Tactics Ogre Reborn for Windows, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4 and 5, and Valkyrie Elysium for Windows. And that was your gaming forecast. Some interesting stuff there. The 2 I'm definitely looking forward to is Sonic Frontiers and Tactics Ogre Reborn. Sonic Frontiers actually looks pretty good. I pre-ordered it for the Xbox Series X, so looking forward to that. And then you got Tactics Ogre Reborn, which is looks pretty awesome. One of the only series I've ever heard of that's actually named after Queen songs. Like, you've got the first game, Ogre Battle, The March of the Black Queen, and that's actually 2 songs on Queen 2, their second album. And then you've got Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together, which again is another Queen song, of course, called Teotoriate on A Day at the Races. So it's an interesting series. You definitely could tell that the creator of it is a huge fan of early Queen. I don't blame him. Dude's got great taste in music. But anyway, with that being said, remember that these dates are subject to change. It happens all the time. Also, if you like any of the music that will be played in this week's episode, links are in the description. And with that being said, let us move on to our first topic. Okay, so for our first story, we got to talk about the Callisto Protocol. That's right, the upcoming survival horror game's coming out in December. I'm looking forward to it because it's being directed by Glenn Schofield, the creator of Dead Space. In fact, I think some of the people who worked on Dead Space are on this game as well. So it looks awesome. Well, unfortunately, it seems that Japanese gamers will not be playing it because the game has been officially canceled over there. Yep, that's right. Apparently, the reason why is because they were denied classification by the Cero board over the extreme violence in the game. Yeah, they said, and I quote, "The Callisto Protocol's Japanese version has been discontinued. At present, it cannot pass the Cero rating, and making any changes that Cero requires would not provide the experience players expect." So, they've decided to just not release it in Japan at all. Now, I gotta say, I'm actually a bit surprised to hear about this from Japan, because usually when it comes to games getting denied classification, that's you usually hear that in like Australia or Germany. Like, those are the 2 strictest when it comes to trying to get your games rated. In fact, there's a lot of games that have never been released in those countries, even to this day, or took many years to get it over there because of the classification board. The one I definitely remember the most was Left 4 Dead 2. That one was denied classification in both Germany and Australia, and it took years for those games to even get out over there. So yeah, it's kind of surprising to hear this coming from Japan. And it appears that Japanese fans are not exactly happy about this thing. Of course, they've gone to Twitter to voice their outrage over the entire thing, and now they're asking Striking Distance to actually include a Japanese language option so they can import the Western version, which in my opinion, I completely support, you know, because honestly, I think the whole thing is pretty ridiculous. You're banning the game for what reason? Because it's a bit violent? Oh, who gives a shit? It's a fucking video game, okay? There's way more violent shit on television and film these days. In fact, there's even more violent shit on the local news, okay? And that shit's actually real compared to what you see in video games and films. So I think freaking out and basically banning a game because, oh, it might be a little too violent, it's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. Yeah, give it a rating, like, to let parents know what's in the game, but don't outright ban it or refuse classification because you think it's a little too violent. Jesus Christ. Some people are just absolute pussies. Anyway, let's move on to our next story. Okay, and for our next story, we have some unfortunately sad news from Sega, because recently they came out with the Sega Genesis Mini 2, and fans noticed that in the staff roll, there was a dedication to Rieko Kodama. Now, if you don't know who that is, she was a longtime artist and designer at Sega. She did a lot of games for them, stuff that you guys definitely grew up with, such as Alex Kidd in the Miracle World, Zillion, Phantasy Star 2, Altered Beast, Alex Kidd in Enchanted Castle, Shadow Dancer, Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2, but she's probably more known for the Phantasy Star series. She was the artist on Phantasy Star 1 and 2. She was in the early planning of Phantasy Star 3, and she directed Phantasy Star 4. She also directed Magic Knight Rayearth, but even more well known, she also was the producer of Skies of Arcadia and its GameCube port Legends. So she had quite the repertoire at Sega. Now, the news only just came out with the release of the Sega Genesis Mini 2, but apparently she unfortunately had passed away back in May, on May 9th, at the age of 59. And the reason why the news didn't come out until the Genesis Mini 2 is because at the family's behest. They didn't want anyone to know about it until the system was launched and people noticed it in the credits. So I have to give props to Sega for respecting the family's wishes, but it's still pretty sad news, so I send my condolences to her friends, family, and former co-workers, and rest in peace, Rieko Kodama. Anyway, folks, I'm going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this.
Sega はロールプレイングゲームも変えてしまう。ファンタシースター。かつてない驚異のグラフィック。壮大な SF ストーリー。その秘密は4メガ。ファンタシースター。
Alright folks, we're back, and first up on our next round of stories, we've got some news about the PS5 coming out of Japan, because it appears the system has officially sold 2 million units over there. Apparently, the standard disc version of the PS5 has sold 1.7 million units, and the digital is at 278,000. Now, that may sound good, but in actuality, it's not really great, because you see, the system only made that number in about 101 weeks. That was it. Now, when you compare it to past PlayStation units, it's even worse. The PS4 took 90 weeks to reach that number, and the PS3 took 73 weeks. Now, if you compare them to the PS2, oh boy, the PS2 reached 2 million units in 9 weeks. Yeah. 2 months it took to actually reach 2 million. So, yeah, it's not that good. And there's quite a lot of reasons why sales for the PS5 have been kind of very low. Definitely one of the biggest ones, of course, is the shipping and production issues that have plagued everyone over like the last 2 years. You can't find these things in stores. Hell, I have yet to see a PS5 in the wild. Regardless of whether it's physical or digital, I haven't seen any of them. Okay? In fact, the only current gen system I've ever seen in a store is the Xbox Series S, and that was it. But I think there's also a bunch of other issues that are the cause of it. You also have the fact that, if I'm going to be quite frank, there's really not that many exclusives to really justify the PS5. Like, if you want a good example, look at the amount of games that were released in the first year of the PS5, and then compare that to the first year of the PS2. It trounces it in the sheer amount of exclusives that system had. But it's also indicative of another major issue, and that's really the death of the PlayStation brand in Japan. I'm sure many of you have heard this over the past several years, but basically the PlayStation brand has been in decline over there. And I think that this is a sign that those claims are actually kind of true. The PlayStation brand over in Japan is almost dead. Now, one of the reasons I hear a lot of people saying why it's dead is because of censorship, and I would say it's partially that. It's a very, very small part of it. Yeah, censorship has become more rampant on PlayStation consoles. They've also become more abusive towards smaller Japanese developers and such. But there's another factor that I think is way more important and that I've never heard anyone really discuss, and that's the death of dedicated home consoles in Japan. They've been in decline over there for like the past 10 to 15 years. And it's not going to get any better. You see, mobile gaming has basically dominated Japanese gaming charts for like the past 10 to 15 years. It's become incredibly popular to the point where it's basically eating into the sales of console games. And in fact, I do believe that that's a major factor into why the Switch exists. Because Nintendo's handhelds were doing incredibly well over there, but their dedicated consoles were selling like shit, so they decided, okay, let's create a hybrid system that you can play on your television, you can play on the go. And it worked. It was an incredibly huge success over there. You also have the fact that, from what I've heard, the Steam Deck is actually doing well over in Japan. The fact of the matter, and I think the numbers prove it, is that people over there are more interested in playing their games on the go than on a television. So that brings us to the question of where the hell does Sony go from here? The obvious answer is to create a handheld system, but unfortunately Sony basically gave up on handhelds after the PlayStation Vita. There's also the fact that the PS5 is way too early in its lifespan to actually replace. I would say maybe 3, maybe 4 or 5 years from now, then you replace it. But from now on, they really just have to hunker down and just kind of brave the storm. You know what I mean? Here's what they should do. Experiment with the idea of a hybrid system by releasing a portable PS4. You know, use that to test the waters for a bit, see if it will actually do very well, and then when it comes to the PlayStation 6, go full steam ahead with a hybrid system. That would be, again, my best suggestion for them, but I highly doubt they'll ever actually do that. But anyway, with that being said, let's move on to our next story. Okay, so our next story has to deal with a Twitter account I'm sure all of you are familiar with. That's, of course, Nebelian. Nebel has been around for a long time. He's someone I'm sure many of you follow, and he usually aggregates video game news. That's all he posts, is video game news and such, and that's fine. However, unfortunately, it appears he's officially shut down his Twitter account. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The reason why he put out this long thing, I'm not going to read all of it, but he says, and I quote, "Today I will move on from both Twitter and Patreon. There won't be any games covered from me on either platform. I've learned a lot in a short period of time." And he goes on to say that basically he started a Patreon. The numbers stagnated in the first weekend and kept going down, and eventually he's just decided that it wasn't worth it, so he shut down both the Patreon and the Twitter. And he said, "Farewell. P.S. The Twitter account will stay up, so nobody can cause any issues with the handle, at least for now." So he's at least keeping the account, but he has it listed as protected. Now, here's the thing, alright? I get, like, I get what he was trying to go for. He was, he has a huge following. He mostly retweets a lot of gaming news and such. And so he sees that and wants to make it into a full-on career. And I get that. I completely get it. But you can't just simply sit around all day on Twitter and expect to get paid. You got to do more than just that. I mean, yeah, I know a lot of modern gaming journalists do that, but that's because they're getting paid by, friggin' Kotaku or Polygon or whatever the fuck. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're hired by a company to do that, okay? He would be doing it completely independent, and doing that stuff independently is incredibly hard. And I think if he really wanted to do that into a career, he had to do more than just Twitter, I don't know if he had anything outside of Twitter and Patreon. I'm not sure if he had a YouTube channel. But if he wanted, I think he should have, if he wanted to do this as a career, then he really should have considered doing a YouTube channel. Put out like a daily video. Do like the headlines of the day and such. That I think would have worked out perfectly. But that's the problem is, if you're not doing that sort of stuff, people are not going to just donate to your Patreon just because you put out stuff on Twitter, Because the thing is, anyone can do that. You know what I mean? You don't have to go to Nebel just to get your video game news. Anyone else can do that. Heck, there's several accounts that do that, Saved You Clicked Video Games comes to mind, So I think I get what he was trying to do here, but I think ultimately it was a bad idea. All right? If he wanted to make money off of this, if he wanted to go the next step, what he should have done was expanded just beyond Twitter. He should have considered doing more YouTube stuff. Apparently he had like a weekly column on his Patreon. That's all right, but again, that's not something that I think most people would be willing to jump on to your Patreon just to go for. You know what I mean? Like, you need to do more than that. I watch a lot of YouTubers that have Patreon accounts, and they do a lot of shit, okay? One that comes to my particular mind is Brad Jones, best known as the Cinema Snob. He doesn't just do Cinema Snob. He has a Patreon account, and he doesn't just do his regular show. He does movie reviews. He does polls and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of content exclusive to Patreons and such. It's a lot more involved than just having a Patreon and an exclusive weekly column, and that's it. You know what I mean? You have to do way more than that. This is the kind of the problem that like Spoonie had. He thought he could do a Patreon and just do his normal reviews, and I don't think he realized that it's a lot. It's a lot more involving. That's why I would never do a Patreon account, because it would be, for me, I would have to be way more involved, and I just don't have the time for that sort of shit. Well, that and also the audience. Let's be honest here. How many people actually watch the show? Like maybe less than 5. That would be it. But anyway, yeah. Like, I think ultimately it was a bad idea. He should have considered doing more than just doing Twitter. You know what I mean? So anyway, I hope he does well. Again, I don't hate the guy. I've got no ill will against him. I just think it was poorly thought out. So anyway, with that being said, let's move on to our next story. Okay, this next one I thought was really neat. So game preservation, of course, is incredibly important. And while preserving the games and preserving some of the culture, commercials and such, is important, one that always kind of gets sidelined is manuals. Well, it appears that one person has made it their mission to preserve gaming manuals. And they've done something that is absolutely incredible. They've scanned every single American PS2 manual in 4K resolution. Yeah. So the user, going by the name of Kirkland, has, over the past 22 years, been slowly preserving every friggin' US PS2 game manual. Okay? That is over 1,900 games. God damn. And apparently he says that he dropped over $40,000 on this collection. As I said, a massive undertaking like this took him over 22 years. He dropped over $40,000 on this entire collection and methodically bought every game. He said, and I quote, "I grabbed new releases when they got down to $20 for about the first 800 games, and then I started picking up used sports games in good condition, and then it was hunting down the odd variants, which is never ending." Wow. Now, of course, this collection is available on the Internet Archive. I will have a link down below, and they're available in 2 and 4K resolutions. PDFs, all that sort of stuff. He said, "The goal is to raise some awareness for game preservation efforts. So many games growing up shaped how we looked at and experienced the world. Of course, as we grow up, we move to other things, but there are a lot of us who have nostalgia for these things and want our kids to be able to enjoy what we did. The whole read the books your fathers read deal. And there have been great efforts to preserve games, Video Game History Foundation, the Strong Museum, grassroots efforts such as MAME, Redump, No Intro, and Carrying Goods Tools before that, which I always thought was that this is great. We're going to have everything preserved, but without the manuals, we're not going to know how to play them." And he's very much right, because here's the thing, you get a lot of these games, they get re-released and on newer consoles, and that's fine, but they usually don't have digitized copies of the manuals, or they're just not what they used to be. Like, for example, okay, take Donkey Kong Country. If you've ever read the manual for that, it's actually pretty funny. You have Cranky Kong in, like, the margins giving all these snide comments about the game and all that kind of stuff. It's really funny, but if, like, you're not getting any of that. And that's why I kind of lament the death of manuals, because it wasn't just a way of teaching you how to play the game. It also added a little bit more to the game and the universe and such. Like, I always liked it when manuals tried to be like an item within the world itself. Like, for example, Sly Cooper, okay? The manual looks like the Thievius Raccoonus, and it has all these little sketches inside of it. Or how, like, for example, Metal Gear Solid 2, it actually had a comic in the manual that taught you how to play the game. Like, I thought little stuff like that was actually really neat, and it's a shame we don't get that stuff anymore. Or if we do, it's in some sort of special collector's edition. But I gotta commend the guy for doing this, for putting in all the time, money, and effort into preserving all of these PS2 manuals. So like I said, there's a link in the description. You can look at a PDF of almost every PS2 North American game out there. The dude even has the manuals for Rule of Rose and Haunting Ground, okay? But anyway, guys, I'm going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this. Alright folks, we're back, and first up on our last round of stories, we have an update on the whole Bayonetta 3 dispute, and dear God, I hope this is the final one. But recently, Hellena Taylor went to Twitter again, and this time she basically admitted that, yeah, what Bloomberg and VGC reported earlier was completely true. She put out a whole thread on Twitter about how some people are calling her a liar and a gold digger, and she feels the need to defend herself. And then immediately, in the second tweet, she says, and I quote, "As I posted on part 3 of my video thread, I explained that their first offer was too low. That offer was $10,000 total. Remember, this is a $450 million franchise, not counting merchandise. I then wrote in Japanese to Hideki Kamiya asking for what I was worth." There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. She basically outright admitted that, yeah, she fucking lied by omission. Okay? It was $10,000, but I'd rather say it was $4,000. Uh-huh. Sure. Oh, yeah, and then she later on goes on to say something about a cameo for $4,000. That's where the $4,000 comes in. So, yeah, she fucking lied. She was a liar from the very beginning. You know what? It's just, you knew from the very beginning that there was something fishy about this entire thing. Okay? I called it. I said that there was something off about this entire thing. The more you think about it, the more there's questions. And yeah, she lied about the entire thing. Though what still gets me is, where the hell does she get the $450 million franchise number from? Because that doesn't make any friggin' sense. Anyone who's been a fan of this franchise knows that the games have barely sold like 4 million copies, okay? It's not exactly the best-selling franchise of all time. So where the hell is she getting the $450 million number? Hell, she even says that's not counting merchandise. Then what is it counting? Okay? You see, my speculation is that what she did is she's basically including Smash Brothers sales in there. Because, of course, Bayonetta was introduced in Smash Brothers Wii U and 3DS. Like a year after the game came out. Which, again, that doesn't make sense because that's assuming that people buy Smash Brothers solely because of Bayonetta. And obviously that's not true. So, the entire thing, it's clear from the very get-go that she just wanted more money. Okay? And when they wouldn't give it to her, she thought that she could basically use her Twitter audience to try and go after Platinum into giving her the offer she wanted, the amount she wanted. That's what it was. Okay? She only went to Twitter because she wanted to use all of you as her own personal army. Well, yeah, you know what? That doesn't work when you still don't answer questions. You know, people are not going to just simply. Yeah, there were some assholes that were took every word she said verbatim and basically went after Platinum and Nintendo about it. But there was a lot of people who just who felt off about the entire thing. Okay, I don't think she thought any of this through. So, yeah, you know what? I think from now on, this is going to be the end of her entire voice acting career. And the thing is, she wasn't really much of a voice actress. She didn't do much between Bayonetta games because she's mostly a theater actress. That's it. She mostly does stage. So, it's like, okay, what, you thought, like, I don't know. Like, honestly, I think she's better off just staying on stage. If this is how she's going to act, if this is how she's going to treat former employers, then, you know what? She might as well should just, like, not ever appear in a video game ever again. So, anyway, it's a damn shame because, you know, I'm a longtime fan of the series. I always liked her work in Bayonetta 1 and 2, and Smash Brothers, and even the anime. But, you know what? It is what it is. She wanted to go within a higher number. She thought she could lie her way through it. Obviously, that didn't work. Oh, well. So, anyway, let's move on to our next story. Alright, in this next one, we gotta talk about Resident Evil. So, with the more recent remakes A lot of people have been wondering about Code Veronica, because it is one of the more classic Resident Evil games. It's sort of a missing link between Resident Evil 3 and 4, and, you know, it hasn't really gotten a remake, so a lot of people have been wondering about it. Well, recently, Noisy Pixel got in touch with the producer Yoshiaki Hirabayashi, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and they asked him about Code Veronica, and his answer was pretty much that there are no concrete plans to develop a remake of Code Veronica, but if the opportunity comes, maybe. Now, while I am hopeful that they will actually remake Code Veronica, it is a bit baffling as to why they haven't. Because, you know, after all, it is somewhat important to the overall story. This is basically the game where Umbrella completely dies out. Like, by the end of it, Umbrella is completely done. So it begs the question of why. And I actually have a theory on this. So, in order to understand this, we have to kind of go into the game itself. So basically, here's what I think, okay? In the game, you come across the Ashford twins, okay? Alexia and Alfred Ashford. Now, they're the grandchildren of Edward Ashford, who was the co-founder of Umbrella. And throughout the game, they try to shoot you and such, but you eventually find out that Alexia is actually just Alfred. Yeah, he basically is just cross-dressing and going around acting like Alexia. And you find out why is because the real Alexia was considered a genius. I think like at the age of 10 or 11, she was like the lead researcher within Umbrella. And she eventually discovered a variant of the T-virus she called the T-Veronica. And so she decided to inject it into herself and put herself into cryogenic sleep as a way to try and control it. But while that happened, her brother Alfred basically went completely insane. He developed a split personality where he would think he was Alexia and would dress up as her and act like her and even like replicated her voice and such. So you can probably see why Capcom would be a little hesitant to actually remake that. But the thing is, like, you would get like a lot of people calling it transphobic or whatever. But the thing is, Alfred isn't trans, he's just fucking insane. Or they would probably call it ableist or whatever the fuck, I don't know. The dude's just nuttier than an orgy at Mr. Peanut's house, alright? But in today's culture, you damn well know that something like that would not fly. People would have an absolute shit fit on Twitter about the entire thing. Hell, I'm pretty sure the people who would bitch and moan about it have never actually played Code Veronica, because if they did, they would have talked about this a while ago. So, who knows at this point. Anyway, with that being said, let's move on to our next story. Okay, and for our final story, we go back to Sony. So, recently they put up a job listing for a game design intern for an entirely brand new internal team. But what makes it very interesting is that they kind of gave away about what kind of game they're making up next. Because basically they said that they are currently co-developing an exciting new project with Naughty Dog in a beloved franchise. Yeah, now of course you got speculation at the ass as to what this beloved franchise is. And since it's with Naughty Dog, a lot of people are thinking it might be a brand new Jak and Daxter game. And honestly, considering the way Sony is nowadays, dear God, no. Please, I beg of you, Sony, don't do it. Look, I would have loved a brand new Jak and Daxter game like 10 years ago, but nowadays, considering the absolute state of PlayStation and Naughty Dog, no. No, fuck no. I don't want to see what a Neil Druckmann directed Jak and Daxter game would look like. And before anyone brings it up, yes, I do know that he was a programmer on Jak 3 and Jak X Combat Racing. But I'm talking about director. Okay, director, writing, all that kind of shit. No, I do not want to see him working on a brand new Jak and Daxter game. I don't want to see modern Naughty Dog even take on Jak and Daxter. Please, for the love of God, just let it be, okay? The series is over. It's done. It had a good run. I just don't want them to fuck it up. Because you know Naughty Dog, they're going to find a way to fuck up Jak and Daxter. And I'm not just talking about story, I'm also talking about gameplay. You know, the unfortunate thing about Naughty Dog is that they've been basically developing the exact same game over the last 15 years. Basically, every game they put out plays the same. Whether it's Uncharted or The Last of Us, they both play exactly the same. They haven't changed the gameplay at all. So I could imagine that if they do a new Jak and Daxter, it's basically going to be exactly like Uncharted and The Last of Us in terms of gameplay. Hell, it might not even be Jak and Daxter. It could be any other IP that Sony hasn't touched in many years. It could be Tomba, it could be Legend of Dragoon, it could be Legend of Legaia, it could be anything like that. Shadow of the Colossus, Eco, Twisted Metal. Dear God, can you imagine modern Sony's take on Twisted Metal? It wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be as fun as it used to be. Dear God, like, it's just, you know, it's sad. It's absolutely sad what the current state of Sony is, because we know exactly what's already going to happen to these IPs the moment Sony tries to bring them back. Anyway, guys, I'm going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this.
Dreamcast!
No idea. どこまで行くというのか、バイオハザード。
I love you.
次世代バイオハザード、コードベロニカ。
Capcom.
Alright folks, and that's it for this week. I want to thank you all for listening. If you liked any of the music that I've played in this week's episode, you can find links in the description, as well as the playlist for all past music. And with that being said, I'll see you next week, and remember to keep gaming.